Okay, carrying on with Zero Escape, the Nonary games, 999, 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors. I always get the order of those screwed up a little bit. So, yeah. We had just finished escaping a flooding room that Junpei was trapped in. And he went up a level, or up a deck on the ship, and now he's in this kind of, grand hall with a staircase. And let's see what happens. His voice trailed off, and all he could do was stare. Hold on 1 second. A polished floor stretched out before him, ornate staircases rising up from the edges, each one of them equidistant from the others. Stairs and pillars were solid wood and Art Nouveau embellishments, and decorations covered the walls and pillars. One second. Alright, I'll go ahead and drink. Oh. Okay. It looked like nothing so much as the entrance to a luxurious mansion from the early 1900s.
This is the inside of a ship?
Junpei couldn't help but wonder.
Oh.
I mean, water flooding cabins does seem like suggest you're on a ship. The water quickly filling the hallway behind him suggested that yes, he was. As he looked, a fresh wave rolled out of the room he'd been in, gathering speed as it moved toward the stairs.
Yeah, that's what I thought. This is totally, Wait, what the hell? A wave? Oh, shit! Shit! Okay, I gotta get out of here.
Junpei spun around, his wet shoes squeaking in protest on the polished floor, and ran toward the tremendous staircase in front of him.
Sea deck. Hurry! Hurry!
As he ran, he glanced quickly at the plates mounted on the wall, denoting the decks of the ship.
A-deck's next.
He took the stairs 2 at a time, not entirely sure where he would find himself. I don't think it's really safe to take stairs 2 at a time in wet jeans and slippery shoes. Just as he began to wonder where, in fact, the stairs did lead.
What?
Characters. Junpei saw another person out of the corner of his eye.
People.
He stopped short, nearly tripping over the next stair, and looked. It wasn't just one person he'd seen. On the landing to the left of the stairs, there were 4 people staring at him. And on the right, 3 more.
A lot of people.
All told, there were 7 of them. It looked as though they had been on their way down the stairs. It stopped short when they saw Junpei, their eyes wide. He'd done the same, of course, and now they stood there staring at one another. Junpei didn't move, one foot placed awkwardly on the next step in the middle of a stride. Who were these people? This entire interaction lasted only a matter of seconds. The woman spoke to Junpei, and the time began to move again.
I guess it's another one of us now.
That is not what I imagined she sounded like. Okay. This is gonna be fun. Sounds more like a school teacher.
A dancer.
The woman was dressed, Junpei thought, rather like a dancer. Her clothes covered very little, and her prodigious jewelry little more.
No, I'm not. You better get moving.
Oh, and they're animated. They were not animated in the DS version, okay. With no further ceremony, she ran straight past Junpei and toward the doors behind him.
Well, okay.
The sudden proximity of a woman with such striking assets left Junpei momentarily stunned. Okay, game. But the others wasted no time and quickly followed the strange woman.
Silver hair?
Yeah, and?
Huh?
First to pass Junpei was a young man with silver hair. He threw a quick glance in Junpei's direction as he ran, muttering.
One of us, huh? What? Nothing.
Following him was an older man, his face calm, without fear. Soft wrinkles sprouted from his eyes, and he came close enough as he passed for Junpei to see wisps of gray in his hair. His composure and shock of hair struck Junpei as rather like that of an elderly lion.
Going up won't do you any good. There are 2 doors, but neither of them will open.
Wait, hold on. The doors won't open?
Next to speak to Junpei was a girl with pink hair and a high voice.
Come on! Aren't you coming? You gotta hurry!
Okay, that is what I expected she would sound like. Her small hand was wrapped around the wrist of another man. His eyes closed, almost as if he were sleeping. His features were graceful, almost serene. He was dressed rather elegantly for someone his age. Something about his posture seemed very refined, and yet Junpei couldn't help feeling he was noble and dignified somehow. He'd certainly never seen one, but the man seemed like what Junpei had always imagined a prince would be like.
That's 9 of us then. All of the cards are in hand.
What does that mean? Junpei opened his mouth to ask what the other man had meant, but the girl with the pink hair rushed past him.
Wait! They're gone. Just what is going on? There's an old man like a lion, a girl with pink hair, and a prince, and I have no idea what they're talking about.
He turned just in time to see 2 more people running toward him. One of them had hair like a bird's nest and looked as though a stiff breeze might topple him. And the other was a veritable mountain of a man. I guess that's supposed to be like a parody of an Apple logo on his cap. Although it looks like a tomato. I find the prospect of tomato corporation's computers amusing. And this is a wonderful interaction. The scrawny one scuttled past Junpei as though he were running for something.
What was that all about?
Hey! What the hell are you just standing there for? Didn't you hear him? The doors on A deck are no good. We gotta check the doors on B deck. Got it? Now go!
Before he had a chance to respond, the man laid a massive hand on Junpei's shoulder. With no more effort than Junpei would have used to brush aside a fly, the man shoved him out of the way. Thrown off balance by the man and the recent events, it took Junpei a few steps to get his bearings. He finally regained his balance and looked up at what the other 7 had been running toward.
Hey man, that was dangerous. Huh?
There were 2 pairs of large iron doors set into the wall in front of him. They looked quite sturdy, and each one had handles jutting from them. Written across the surface of each door in red paint was a number. The door on the right, 4.
This one says 5.
Yep.
Insane.
Mm-hmm. The guy Junpei had decided to call Silver was mumbling to himself.
I woke up and had a number on the door just like that.
You too, eh?
With an arched eyebrow, the lion looked over at
My
Silver.
cell was the same. A number upon the door. I opened it, ran down the hallway outside, and found myself in a rather grand room full of stairs, as I suspect the rest of you.
It was as though the floodgates had been opened, they all began to talk at once.
Me too.
Same for me. There was a door with a number on it.
It soon became clear that each one of them had awoken in a room with a locked door and solved a puzzle to escape. They'd all ended up in the same room. Almost as though they'd been guided there.
Yes, we all saw the same thing. That's not important. We need to hurry.
You think I don't know that lady?
Before the dancer had time to finish, Silver was already running.
Open! Damn it!
He grabbed hold of the door labeled 5 and pulled. However,
Fuck, it's not opening. This damn thing won't even budge.
Out of my way!
the mountain grabbed Silver's shoulder and tossed him aside. His path cleared, he took a few steps back and then threw himself at the door. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. The door shook as his body slammed into it, but showed no signs of breaking or opening. The mountain threw himself at the door again.
A body slam from a guy that big didn't even budge it. There must be some other way.
Junpei turned toward door 4. Next to the door on the wall was a small box.
This looks just like the device next to the door in that room earlier. So that means this door is probably locked too. But still...
He had to check. Junpei grabbed a handle and threw all of his weight into it. It was locked as tight as the door next to it, as he had suspected. Junpei punched the door. It did not respond.
Are there any other doors?
He'd barely finished the thought when C-deck plate he'd passed on his way up sprang up unbidden to his mind. His body moved before he had time to think. Junpei turned and ran back toward the stairs. He had scarcely taken a step when, at the top of the stairs next to an ornate clock embedded into the wall, he saw a person. It was a girl. She looked to be the same age as Junpei. He froze, unable to look away from her face. He wasn't confounded by her beauty or something equally silly. No, there was another reason he couldn't take his eyes off the girl. Junpei had seen her somewhere before. He couldn't quite remember where, but he knew. He knew he'd met her before. The girl, too, stared at Junpei, similarly stunned. Her response suggested she'd seen him before as well.
Huh?
Without saying a word, Junpei walked slowly toward her. She didn't move. It was almost as though she was held in place by some sort of magic spell. As Junpei stepped onto the landing, the spell broke. No sooner had he set his foot down than the whole ship shook a second time. The quake caught the girl unprepared and she fell.
Watch out!
Moving on instinct, Junpei leapt to catch her. Or so he thought.
Oh.
Her face was far closer than it should have been, mere inches from his own. He was flat on his back, and she had landed squarely on top of him. The girl seemed as confused as he did, and her face suggested she still hadn't fully recovered from seeing him. For a moment that seemed to stretch for a very long time, they stared at one another. The ship stopped shaking. Everything was quiet. Water could be heard from the bottom of the ship, lapping faintly at the walls and ceilings, but eventually that faded as well. Silence was complete, a thick, muffling blanket. At last, the girl opened her
Oh
mouth.
my gosh! Is that you, Junpei?
That's about what I thought. Well, I've heard her well, never mind. Junpei, Junpei. Her words echoed through Junpei's head, and suddenly his memory returned.
Akane.
Why hadn't he realized it before? The girl was Akane Kurashiki. She and Junpei had been friends in childhood. They'd gone to elementary school together for 6 years. Childhood friend trope. Take a shot. But what was she doing on the ship? Her soft eyes were only inches away from his own. He could feel the warmth of her face. Feelings he thought long forgotten began to work their way to the surface. He could feel his face heating up. At that moment, I mean, it could be if you want it to be. Let's see. At that moment, a speaker crackled to life and a cold, eerie voice filled the room. Well, I'll let... The dialogue doesn't seem as weird when... yeah, once you've finished the game.
What?
What's that voice?
What is that voice? They hurriedly untangled themselves from one another and struggled to their feet. I know the game switched back to adventure mode, but I think I'm going to leave it on the novel screen because it does give more information and it gives me something to read rather than just sit here and occasionally comment. Their 7 companions had heard the voice as well, and many of their faces had gone pale. They looked around frantically, desperate to locate the source of the voice. At last they found it. A speaker said in the ceiling. And with a speaker shaped like that, it's no surprise it's coming out as garbled as it is. We're in a Saw-style situation. The voice was harsh, obscured occasionally by the crackle of static. Junpei recognized it. How could he have forgotten it?
That guy in the gas mask! Hey, asshole! What the hell is this? Come on out here. I want to get a look at you.
What do you mean to do to us?
Ooh, foreshadowing. Some are already familiar with it. The Nonary game.
Nonary game.
What the hell's that?
The voice continued, implacable.
What is he talking about?
Hey, there's something in my pocket. Check this out.
Silver reached into his pocket and pulled out a small slip of paper. The rest of them reached into their own pockets and pulled out similar slips of paper. Junpei followed suit and dug into his pocket, the pocket of his pants, and found it possibly a very wet. He felt the telltale crumple of paper, slightly damp from his ordeal earlier. Slightly damp, okay, only.
Hey, I got one too.
Then it would seem Zero has seen fit to grace us each with a letter. Would you mind terribly reading it to us, young man?
His request had been delivered to Junpei, who, after a short moment of surprise, did as he had been asked.
On this ship, you will find a handful of doors emblazoned with numbers. We will call them the numbered doors. The doors in front of you are a pair of the same. The key to opening these numbered doors are the numbered bracelets that each of you possess. Should you total the numbers on your numbered bracelets and find that the digital root of that number is equal to the number of that door, the door will open.
So yeah, the digital root stuff is very important to this game, and after a while you stop needing the calculator and you just do the math in your head.
Only those who have opened the door may pass through. There are, however, limits. Only 3 to 5 people can pass through one numbered door. All those who enter must leave, and all who enter must contribute. So this thing on my arm is a bracelet.
He glanced around. It looked like everyone else had one as well and had come to much the same conclusion.
The purpose of the game is simple. Leave this ship alive. It is hidden, but an exit can be found. Seek a way out. Seek a door that carries a 9.
And here we have the titular 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors.
I hear a bell. I think it's coming from over by the stairs.
It's the clock telling us the time.
Everyone had their eyes on the antique clock embedded in the wall. 8, 9. 9 o'clock. The 10th never came.
It rang 9 times, so 9 9 o'clock then?
I think it's 9 p.m. I couldn't see anything when I tried looking out the window earlier. It has to be nighttime.
If that is the case, then we would need to escape by 6 a.m. tomorrow.
The speaker went silent and did not speak again.
Hey! You bastard! What do you mean by that? Come out here, you asshole!
I like Silver.
That guy won't stop shouting. And the others.
I think Silver was called something different in the DS version. I think he was called Santa or something like that. Everyone's dotting so hard. Junpei too was consumed by his thoughts.
I have way too many questions. Who is Zero? What's the Nonary game? What's it for? Is he some nutjob just doing this to mess with us, or does he have some other purpose?
You're asking all the right questions, Junpei, and we're going to spend an entire game finding out the answers to these questions.
Why do we need to be part of this insane game? And the others? Why are these 8 people here? And the most confusing of them all. Why is Akane here? I haven't seen her since elementary school. Why her? Why now? Coincidence? No. There's no way. There has to be a reason.
Blue swirly stuff. Oh
I
god.
don't know what exactly, but there has to be.
Very well.
The lion's voice seemed oddly loud in the silence.
Standing around here won't do us any good. Best we get moving, don't you think?
I mean, yeah, we only have 9 hours.
Get moving?
Are you planning to open the numbered doors? Hey, wait! But don't tell me you're actually gonna do what this Zero says.
No, that's not what I mean.
The lion shook his head, mildly annoyed.
I'm saying let's find another way. After all, we haven't really examined this place yet.
What?
Looks like everybody else is wearing a bracelet.
Where have we not looked?
At least the dancer is.
Everyone searched A-Deck already, right?
Kane is.
Yeah, we were kind of in a rush though, so we probably missed some things.
Why don't we check out the lower floors first? We should see how deep this place goes.
I can work with that.
Silver
Then
does.
let's go.
Whoa! What the hell? It's completely submerged.
Damn.
None of y'all happen to be Olympic level swimmers and can see in the dark, can you?
The water level keeps rising like this, we're all gonna drown.
No, I don't believe that's something we have to worry about.
The prince knelt down and gently drew his hand across it.
See? The water's not flowing. That means the origin of the water has been stopped. Perhaps this Zero fellow has used some sort of remote control to seal a watertight door lower down.
Prince's voice doesn't sound exactly like I thought it would.
He said that our time limit was 9 hours.
Mountains sounds like I thought it would.
In other words, this water won't rise for 9 hours.
And you're saying we won't sink till then?
Well, that may be a little too optimistic. No point to wishful thinking.
That's depressing.
If we don't determine a way to advance from this point, we are stuck on A-Deck and C-Deck.
Looks that way.
Hey, hold on. How about we check C-Deck before we jump to any conclusions? We might find something there.
Huh, you're right. I think we should look at the metal doors by the big staircase, too. They're pretty suspicious.
No numbers on either door. And I don't see an authentication device either. Nope. It's locked.
This one too. Damn, none of the doors are opening.
Hey guys, over here. There's another door behind the stairs.
Ooh.
This one doesn't open either.
We'll see about that. Hey, old man, give me a hand.
Old man.
Using force, I see. Let's give it a try. It won't budge.
Could you not just start shouting out of nowhere? You almost gave me a heart attack, you know.
Oh, sorry.
It doesn't appear to have moved even with two of us trying. It's very well made.
Idiots. Try using your brain first.
Huh?
Take a closer look.
A keyhole?
Right. It's obvious what we need to open this door.
A key, huh?
You got a problem?
No, I just really doubt we'll find a key that easily.
Anybody here an expert lockpicker? Ignoring the tense air between the two, Junpei moved closer to examine the doorknob.
What's this?
Just above it was a strange mark in the shape of a circle surrounding a dot.
There's a mark on it. Does it mean something?
I smell Resident Evil style key card or key emblem puzzles.
Hey, look! Over here, too!
Hmm?
Hmm?
Pinkhair was looking at the double doors they hadn't examined yet.
More doors.
I think they're elevators. There's an inverted triangle button by them.
May as well try pressing it. Huh. Nothing.
Maybe the power isn't on.
Or we need to do something with this card reader. And there's a strange mark here, too.
Oh, that isn't... Oh, my zodiac symbols are terrible.
What is this? It looks like a lowercase h with a dash drawn across the upper stem of the H.
Junpei stared at it for a while.
This is the symbol of Saturn.
Thanks, Akane.
It's an astrological symbol.
Then the mark on the other door.
Yuri?
That was the sun symbol.
No, son.
We saw the same symbols on 8.
We did?
I don't remember that.
A-deck, huh? I haven't been there, so I wouldn't know.
We may as well check again since we're talking about it.
The lions urged them on, and they took the stairs up.
There. The 2 doors next to the stairs. The one on the left had a keyhole with a similar symbol engraved on it.
She's right. It looks similar to what we saw downstairs.
This is an earth symbol.
You are just a fountain of esoteric, astrological, zodiological
The
knowledge, aren't you?
horizontal line symbolizes the equator, and the vertical one represents the prime meridian.
I see.
Junpei looked up at the ceiling.
The ceiling. Metal plates. Huh. It's as if it's covering something up.
Perhaps it was a dome of some kind.
That's probably a good guess.
I wish we could get out through there.
Be realistic. We'd need a lot of explosives to open that up.
The windows, too. Huh. They're all covered.
There were several windows along both sides of the ship, or at least there had been. They too were covered with metal plates.
In other words,
this scenario is kind of similar to how Danganronpa is set up, although that game is set in a high school, Hope's Peak High School. And similarly, like, all the windows have metal bolted over them, and all the entrances are locked off. I believe Danganronpa came out at the same, or about the same time as 999, so there's a lot of overlap between the two player bases, but people tend to prefer whichever of the two they played first, and I played this one first, so having played both, I like the escape the room mechanics in here more than I like the evidence gathering and trial mechanics of Danganronpa, because Danganronpa feels more like maybe an Ace Attorney game mixed with visual novel with a similar trapped. But yeah, the main thing in that game is not escape, or at least not scene to scene type of escape scenarios.
we're trapped. All the exits go nowhere.
Junpei was not happy. The girl with pink hair spoke up.
Well, I'm sure they go somewhere. We just can't open them.
Then the mountain spoke.
You don't know that. For all we know, they just open into walls or take us in circles.
Kind of a defeatist attitude. The prince did not agree.
No. I'm sure they go somewhere. Otherwise, what point would there be? And we can open them. Well, 2 of them at least.
Oh, you mean the numbered doors.
All eyes turned toward the doors with the numbers on them. The atmosphere in the room grew tense.
Hey, wait a minute. I think I said this earlier, but I don't think we should do that.
The dancer moved in front of the doors as if to block
We'd
them.
have to be crazy to open these doors. If we do that, we're doing exactly what Zero wants us to do.
Suddenly everyone began to speak at once.
May as well give it a shot. We can't stay here forever.
Yes, I'm in favor as well.
No, I'm totally against this.
But shouldn't we at least try?
We don't know what'll happen. We should stay here.
We don't have time for that. In 8.5 hours, this ship is going to sink.
Wow, it already took you a half hour to look at all this stuff on the ship so far. The clamor of voices made it next to impossible to determine who was saying what. The arguments grew more and more intense until people were shouting and screaming at one another.
Hey, shut up!
They fell silent and all eyes turned to Junpei. He felt each stare burning into him, but he refused to
Before we
flinch.
try and decide where we're going to go, there's something else we ought to do.
What's that?
We need to exchange information. We don't know anything about each other. I want to know who you guys are. Who you are, where you came from, why you ended up here. Don't tell me you aren't curious too.
They were silent. Some of them looked the other way, or bit their lip, or crossed their arms and stared at the ceiling. Oh, that isn't suspicious. But one of them spoke up. It was Akane.
I agree. I think Junpei is right.
Jumpy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm talking about him. I just call him Junpei. His name is Junpei.
She pointed toward
We're
Junpei.
childhood friends. We went to the same elementary school.
Wait, stop.
Dun dun dun.
Don't tell us stuff we didn't ask you about. Zero's probably watching us right now. What are you gonna do if he's listening in?
Oh, would that be bad?
Hell yeah, it would! We don't know how much that bastard knows about us. Maybe he just picked a bunch of random people to kidnap.
It seems highly unlikely since Junpei and Akane know each
If
other.
that is the case, then it'd be dangerous for us to let him know too much. If Zero knows who we are, he could go after our families. Maybe he'd tell us he had them to get us to do stuff, you know?
I mean, that was literally the carrot and stick motivation in Danganronpa is these kids' families were placed into danger's way to get the kids to do what Monokuma wanted.
But we still need to know what our names are. It's going to be hard to talk to each other if we don't have names.
Alright, then why don't we have code names?
To him, apparently it seemed like the obvious solution.
Code names?
Yeah, we'll each pick something. Like, I'll be 7.
7? Why are you 7?
Seemed a fair question. The mountain stuck out his left arm.
Because this bracelet number says 7.
Oh, I get it. Yeah, that's a good idea.
He smirked.
Alright, I'm gonna be Santa.
That's right, this is where the name came
You
from.
chumps know Japanese? No? Well, San means 3. So, I'll be Santa. You know, like Santa Claus. Fits, don't you think?
Then your bracelet number.
Yeah, it's got a 3 on it. Good job, Grandpa.
Just like the mountain had done, Silver thrust out his left hand. Sure enough, the face of the bracelet read 3.
Very well then. I'll go next, shall I? My bracelet number is 1. Given that, I think Ace seems appropriate.
I'll be Lotus then. As I'm sure you all know, it has 8 petals. Which means, of course, that my bracelet number is 8.
I would appreciate it if you would call me Snake.
Snake.
My bracelet number is 2. Since Ace has chosen cards, then I choose dice. Snake eyes, clearly. Which is particularly relevant given that I'm blind.
You can't see?
I knew it.
He kept his eyes closed during their entire ordeal, which had suggested something strange, but to hear it said so casually, it was something of a surprise. Everyone seemed a little nervous at the prince's proclamation, but no one seemed to know how to react to it. Yeah, a lot of these characters have interesting things going on with them.
Me next.
There was one person, however, who didn't seem to be surprised in the least. The girl with the pink hair.
I want to be Clover.
4.
You know, like a 4-leaf clover. Good luck, right?
He almost bored, she held out her left hand. The face of her bracelet showed the number 4. They'd come around to Junpei. He held out his bracelet.
Alright, my number's 5. So my code name is gonna be...
Why have one? It's not like there's any point to it now.
The answer cut him off
I mean,
mid-sentence.
we all know your name already. You're Junpei.
Oh,
They all nodded. Kane stepped forward nervously.
Then you should all call me by my name too. Because, I mean, it doesn't seem...
It doesn't seem fair to Junpei.
You're thinking it's not cool for you to hide your name after you told us his.
Kane fidgeted awkwardly. Junpei decided he had to do
what's
something.
your bracelet number?
It's 6.
She hesitated for a moment and then held out her left hand. As she claimed, the bracelet's face showed a 6. Junpei looked at it for a moment and thought,
Alright then, why don't we call you June?
June?
Yeah, you know, it's the 6th month of the year. So you're June.
Jumpy?
Kane kneaded her hands and looked up at Junpei, uncertain. He smiled back at her
Are you
reassuringly.
good with that?
Yeah.
She thought about it for a few more minutes and then seemed to come to a decision and gave Junpei a small nod.
Okay then.
Their names decided, Junpei ran over them quickly in his
So
head.
this is how everyone breaks down. 1 is Ace. 2 is Snake. 3 is Santa. 4 is Clover. 5 is me. 6 is June. 7 is 7. And 8 is Lotus. That means 8 of us have revealed our bracelet numbers. The only one left.
That glasses guy with hair like a bird's nest.
I think, yeah.
You haven't said a thing so far, have you?
His skin was pale, his breathing was heavy, and he was soaked with nervous sweat. Oh, this can't be good. His behavior seemed very suspicious, or perhaps simply emotionally unstable. It was difficult to tell. Whatever the case, it seemed clear that he had only a fingertip's worth of a grip on his sanity. The girl with pink hair, Clover, walked up to him slowly. She put her hands on her hips and eyed him suspiciously.
What number are you?
He didn't answer. Hold on, I gotta sneeze. His bloodshot eyes twitched from person to person and his breath came in hot pants.
Hey, I'm talking to you.
The man licked his dry lips with a shaking tongue and spoke with a voice like old paper.
Isn't it obvious? There are 9 people here,
Okay, I did not expect that voice out of him.
and you know who numbers 1 through 8 are. I'm the only one left.
So you're 9?
Yeah.
He extended a trembling arm. The bracelet did indeed say 9. Clover looked at it contemptuously.
What's your code name?
Code name?
What do you want us to call you? We all made up names. You should too.
I don't need one.
Why not?
Because I am not gonna stay here with you.
Sounds like a crotchety old man. He took a shuddering breath and exhaled. Clover looked at him with something very like disgust.
You've got some sort of plan?
I do.
Yeah? What's that?
You sure you want to know?
Yeah?
All right. Let me show you.
Oh boy.
I'm gonna do this.
By the time they realized what he was doing, it was too late to stop him. The man's body moved like a snake's. the blink of an eye, he had slid around behind her and wrapped his arm around her waist.
Hey! What the hell do you think you're doing?
Silver, Santa, leapt forward toward Clover, the ninth man. He was halfway there when
Stay back.
suddenly the man's hand dove into his pocket.
Ah.
He held it to Clover's pale, quivering neck.
If you get any closer, I'll cut her open. Yeah, that's right.
The man's smile was neither friendly nor reassuring. Sweat poured down his neck, soaking the collar of his shirt.
Clover, are you all right?
The prince, Snake's voice, sounded oddly concerned.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Her voice shook, making her words even less convincing.
What the hell are you trying to do? I told you. This is my plan.
What are you gonna do to her, you sick son of a bitch?
Don't worry. I'm not gonna do anything to her. If she just does what I tell her to, I'll let her go.
He started to move backwards, slowly keeping his grip on Clover.
Slowly. That's right. Just follow me.
Keeping their distance, Junpei and the others followed. Eventually the man reached the wall. He gave a start as his back touched it and then glanced around quickly and spoke.
Here. Verify. The left. Look on your left. Do you see the device on the wall? Place your hand on the scanner panel, the round part.
What if I don't?
The man's nostrils flared and he looked like he was about to choke.
Are you an idiot? What do you think? I could slit your throat right now. I'll kill you if I have to. All I need is your bracelet. Just do it. Do it now.
He pressed the knife against Clover's neck hard.
Okay, I'll do it.
Slowly she stretched her left hand out toward the device.
Like this?
Her back was to it and she had to feel around for a moment before she found the circular panel. It made a cold electronic noise, and on the display above, her hand and asterisk appeared.
So that's how it works. He called that round part of the device the scanner panel. If we put our left hand on it, our bracelet number gets entered into the device. Then, should you total the numbers on your numbered bracelets and find that the digital root of that number is equal to the number of that door, the door will open.
Junpei shifted his eyes to the door itself. The number on it was 5.
Door 5. But why does this guy know so much about how this thing works? It's like he knows exactly what to do.
Good. Good. You're done. Next.
His bloodshot eyes crept from person to person until finally they stopped on Lion Ace.
You, right? You're the one with the number 1 bracelet, right?
Yes, I am. So?
Then you're next. Just verify your number like this little brat did. What are you doing? Do it! Don't you care what happens to her?
Okay, just calm down.
Ace held up his hands, palm out. The ninth man jerked his chin toward the device.
I'm coming over.
Slowly, cautiously, Ace moved toward the device. After what seemed like an agonizing eternity, he reached it.
Now, verify.
All right, this is what you wanted, right?
Ace nodded and placed his hand on the scanner panel. The device beeped again, and a second asterisk appeared.
Now the device has both Clover and Ace's numbers, 4 and 1. 4 plus 1 is 5. It's the same as the number written on the door, but it won't open yet. Only 3 to 5 people can pass through one numbered door. One more person. If what Zero said is true, he needs one more person. Who? Who does he need?
Get back.
His voice shook, but the knife he held to Clover's throat made his words a command. Ace took 2, then 3 steps back.
No! Farther! More than that! Go all the way back!
Okay.
Slowly, Ace did what he was told. The ninth man's lips curled into a cruel, twisted smile.
Don't tell me.
That was when Junpei understood his plan.
Clover's 4 and Ace is 1. Added to the ninth man's 9. 4 plus 1 plus 9 is 14. And the digital root of 14, 1 plus 4, is 5. In other words...
Thank God you were all so cooperative. Now I can get out of this nightmare.
He pressed his own hand against the scanner panel. Third asterisk appeared on the screen. He dropped his hand to the lever on the side of the device and pulled. The door opened with a heavy metallic groan.
Good. I don't need you anymore.
He let go of Clover. Junpei leapt toward the ninth man, but he wasn't fast enough.
She's all yours.
The man shoved Clover and hopped through the door.
Okay. Have a good one, guys. I'm going off ahead now. Well then, goodbye.
He raised his hand and waved, a twisted smirk on his face. Then he was gone. The door ground shut with a dull clang of metal on metal.
Clover, are you all right?
Snake ran to Clover's side as she lay on the floor.
Yeah, I'm fine.
She climbed unsteadily to her feet and once there leaned heavily on Snake's shoulder for support.
Damn it!
Junpei ran to the door.
Bastard!
The others followed him. Several pairs of hands grabbed a hold of the handles and pulled.
Open, damn it!
They grunted and strained, but
Shit! It won't budge.
that was when Lotus, the dancer, spoke. Her voice was quiet.
Do you hear something?
Like, what?
Like some sort of beeping.
Junpei pressed his ear against the cold metal of the door. The others did the same.
You're right. I can hear it too.
What is it?
Then they heard something else. It was the ninth man.
Why is it stopping? God damn it! You lied!
Important information.
This wasn't supposed to happen! This is wrong! This is wrong!
His voice shook with fear. Safe on the outside, they stepped back from the door and looked at one
What is
another.
happening in there?
Open the door, please! I'm begging you! Help me! Please get me out of here! Get me out of here!
Ah, God damn it!
Junpei grabbed hold of the device. He slammed his hand on the scanner panel. Nothing happened.
Why?
So it's engaged.
Why won't it work? Engaged? Is it because it's occupied?
Oh my god, oh my god! There's no time left! Listen, I was lied to! He lied to me! He put me in here! It was him! He killed me! It was him!
Okay. The explosion rocked the room. Instinctively they ducked, then stood up slowly when they realized there was no danger. I forgot the first game had explosives. No one spoke. Silence filled the room.
A beep?
All eyes turned toward it.
Did that thing just make that sound?
The display changed from engaged to vacant.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if we can open it.
7. The mountain swallowed hard.
Okay.
Junpei nodded and placed his hand on the scanner panel. A red asterisk appeared on the LCD panel.
Well, it registered my bracelet number, but it won't open with one person. We need at least 2 more people.
What to do? Ace and Lotus, Snake and 7, or Santa and June. I don't know that this choice matters that much. Let's go with Santa and June, because I do trust June.
Santa and, June, you think you could give me a hand here?
The pun was a little too on the nose, but the mood was still grim. Both Santa and June lifted their left hands silently. He verified and she followed suit.
3 plus 6 is 14. The digital root of 14, 1 plus 4 equals 5. This should do it. Now we just need to pull the lever on the side. You guys ready? I'm gonna open it.
Junpei grabbed this lever and looked back over his shoulder. They sniffed and nodded, stiffened and nodded. Junpei nodded back and set his mouth in a grim line, then slowly lowered the lever. Door 5 opens up. There was a metallic groan and the door slid open. A breath of air drifted out of it, carrying a stench that made them gag. Junpei grimaced and put a hand over his mouth.
God. Good God.
Lotus and Ace shuddered. 7 grunted.
Whoa, that's pretty bad.
Even Santa's voice shook.
He blew up.
It appeared that Santa was right. The hallway on the other side of the door was splattered with chunks of torn flesh and dark red blood. Yeah, that's pretty horrific. The shriek echoed across the room. It had come from June. Then her strength left her and she dropped. As Junpei turned to catch her, the door groaned shut. She crumpled to the floor.
June, are you okay?
Junpei dropped to his knees and put his arm around her shoulders. That was when he noticed. Her whole body was feverish. She was radiating intense heat.
What the hell? Where'd this fever come from?
June didn't answer. Her face looked like wax and her whole body began to shake.
Okay, let's just rest for a minute, okay? You think you can walk?
She nodded weakly. Junpei lifted June to her feet and guided her to a nearby chair.
Here we go.
As gently as he could, he set her down in it.
How are you feeling? Are you alright?
She nodded, and as she did, a single huge tear rolled down the side of her face.
Why did this happen?
Her voice cracked, broken by misery and grief and choked by sobs.
Why did this happen?
Junpei spun around.
Do any of you know what the fuck is going on here? Who's Zero? What's this Nonary game? Come on! Anybody? Anything? What the hell is going on? What are we doing here?
No one spoke. Ace, Snake, Santa, Clover, 7, and Lotus. They simply stood there, 7 pairs of downcast eyes and 7 grim lines for mouths. June's body shook with silent sobs. They slowed as the minutes ticked by and eventually they stopped. And suddenly, in the cold, heavy silence that had enveloped them like a thick fog, a bell began to ring. Clock in the central hall. 7, 8, 9, 10 times. And then on the 10th ring it stopped. The sound of the bell faded away into silence.
It's 10 o'clock then.
Ace said what each one of them had been thinking.
It's been an hour since Zero's little announcement.
7 deep voices echoed across the room. 7's deep voice echoed across the room.
Fuck! I've had enough of this crap!
Santa leapt to his feet, his fists clenched.
How long are we gonna pussyfoot around like this? We've only got 8 hours until this time limit Zero is going on about is up. Let's get going already! Go! Go!
Santa's outburst fell on deaf ears. No one seemed to agree with him. They stared back at him, their eyes blank and their faces tired. Finally, Lotus spoke.
No, I refuse. I'm not gonna end up like him.
Him? You mean the 9th man?
Of course, who else?
In his mind's eye, Junpei saw the corpse again.
Blood and pieces of flesh.
A dark reddish-black pool of blood. The scattered pieces of flesh, organs strewn across the floor like the blossoming of a grotesque flower. The explosion that had torn through his body had been powerful.
There's no way for a person to die.
The 9th man's neck had been twisted at an odd angle. Junpei suspected the detonation had thrown him against the wall. Half of his face was crushed, the other half was covered in blood. Most of his abdomen had been emptied, either by the explosion or by gravity. He had landed on his back, stark white ribs jutted up out of his chest like the legs of some sort of macabre crab. See, at least in this game, they only show the blood splatter on the wall. Like in the third game, man, it gets gruesome. Junpei felt something flip in his stomach.
I think he just screwed up.
Eyebrows went up and Santa continued.
Probably set off some sort of trap, and that killed him. I'm not gonna screw up like that. I'm getting out of here alive.
Whatever Snake was laughing at, Santa did not find particularly humorous.
It's so goddamn funny.
Oh, my apologies. You were just, so very confident. I couldn't help myself.
Man, that does not sound like what I thought Snake was selling.
What the fuck?
I think you've mistaken the situation.
Huh?
The ninth man's death. It had nothing to do with the trap. Or at least not the sort of trap you imagine it did.
Then?
He broke one of Zero's rules. That was why he died. Quite simple if you think about it.
Ah, the voice of reason.
You still don't... All right. How about you take a moment and think back to what Zero said? Specifically, what did he say about the number of people?
He said only 3 to 5 people can pass through one numbered door, right?
And after that? You've forgotten the relevant part. What did Zero say?
Santa furrowed his brow in thought. Junpei thought back. Zero said, everyone who verified had to go.
All those who enter must leave, and all who enter must contribute, right? I think it was something like that. Whatever it was, it means that groups of less than 3 or more than 5 can't go through.
That is correct. A gold star for you, Junpei.
Snake inclined his head toward Junpei. Let me see where I am in the flow of the game. Alright. Still haven't made the first choice yet. Alright.
The ninth man, however, broke that rule. He tried to pass through a numbered door by himself. That was why he was executed.
And Zero's watching us from somewhere.
You know, I'm honestly trying to remember if the original DS game had the flowchart. Good question. Good question. We'll figure that out later. We got a lot of game to go.
Making sure we don't break any rules.
Oh, I'm not so sure of that.
Why not?
Because this execution system is entirely automatic. You didn't notice? There's no need for him to monitor us.
Just responding in the chat. Let's see.
What do you mean?
Snake looked at Seven with what could only be described as pity and sighed.
Very well. I see it must be me who tells you. I've waited long enough, I suppose. I had hoped Zero might spare me the trouble, but that seems increasingly unlikely.
He couldn't see them, of course, but perhaps Snake sensed the confused eyes upon him. When Ace spoke, he gave words to everyone else's thoughts.
Do you know something?
Well, I know a great many things, but yes.
What is it you know?
Here.
Snake removed a card from the pocket of his jacket.
What does it say?
See for yourself.
With a flourish, he presented it to Ace, who took a close look at it and spoke.
Come on now, what's the point of giving me this?
Give me that.
Santa snatched the card from Ace, but his expression of disgust turned to one of confusion.
Huh? The hell is this?
Seven tugged it out of Santa's hands.
I see.
Hey, Seven has a nice head of hair. The card went from Seven to Lotus, from Lotus to June, and finally to Junpei. He looked at it and understood.
This is Braille.
Braille, the written language of the blind. The card was covered with small embossed bumps. Junpei recognized it, but he certainly couldn't read
Sorry,
it.
guys, I can't read this. Here, have it back.
Junpei handed the card back to Snake, who nodded at him with a small smirk.
Okay, that was fun. What's so important about that card?
I found it in my pocket. I can only assume it is a message from Zero.
From Zero?
A message?
What does it say?
Suddenly everyone was crowded around Snake, desperate to hear what the message said. Santa especially looked as if he were about to grab hold of Snake and shake the answers from him. Snake raised his hand.
Calm down now. No need to panic. You don't need to force me. I'll read it.
Junpei swallowed hard and waited for him to start. He was not the only one. Presently Snake began to read, his voice calm. His fingers glided over the tiny bumps as he spoke.
Bracelet number 2. Since you are not blessed with sight, I shall bless you, and only you, with information. I shall tell you of the function of the red, of the dead, and of the bracelet.
The red is the recognition device. It will verify your number. Beside every numbered door, you will find a red. The dead is the deactivation device. It does exactly what it says. Once you have passed through the numbered door, you must use dead to stop the detonator in your bracelet. But perhaps you are wondering, what does this detonator detonate? I am afraid this might be something of a surprise. They have placed a small bomb inside of you, and people whom you are about to meet. You swallowed it while you were unconscious. I have no doubt that by the time you read this note, the bomb will have passed your stomach and found its way to your small intestine. In other words, you will be unable to regurgitate it. I suggest you do not try. As I mentioned before, the bracelet on your left hand contains a detonator. Think of it as a remote fuse, or timer, for the bomb in your body. There is only one condition which will cause it to detonate. That condition is that you enter a numbered door. Once you have done so, the timer will activate, no matter who you may be. You will have 81 seconds.
Awfully specific.
After that time, the detonator has not been deactivated. It will send a signal to the bomb in your body, instructing it to explode. In order to deactivate the detonator, every person who verified their number at the red must also verify their numbers at the dead. Once all numbers have been verified by the dead, you need only pull the lever at its side, and the countdown will cease. Anyone who does not verify their number at the red will find themselves unable to verify their number at the dead. That is to say, if you should pass through a numbered door without first verifying your number at the red, in 81 seconds, you will be dead.
Oh. Oh, fun.
You must also keep in mind that the numbered doors will close automatically after 9 seconds have passed. So long as the doors open, the dead will not function. You would do well to remember this. Lastly, let us discuss how to remove the bracelets. There are only 2 ways to do so. 1. You escape from this ship. 2. Your heartbeat reaches 0.
In
other words, once the bracelet is taken outside the confines of the ship, or detects that Nonari's heartbeat has fallen to 0, it will shut down automatically. There is no other way to remove your bracelet. If you attempt to force it off, or disable the detonator, the bomb within you will immediately explode.
This is all the information which I can impart to you. How you choose to use it is for you to decide. If used wisely, you can eliminate those who might be a danger to you. For a time, you would be able to control your fate. I wish you the best of luck.
Oh, joy. Snake finished reading and carefully returned the card to his pocket.
So it's saying Only those who verify their numbers at the red can pass through the numbered doors. Teams can't add or subtract people after they're scanned in. The reds, deads, and bracelets enforce the rules. They're judge, jury, and executioner.
Shit! A fucking bomb! Come out! Come out, damn it!
In defiance of Zero's suggestions, both Santa and Seven put fingers down their throats and began to gag. The rest stiffened, some touched their stomachs, some simply stared at their bracelets. Junpei gingerly touched his stomach.
Bomb inside me.
The thought of it made him queasy. His stomach felt oddly hollow, his legs were weak.
What made Zero think creating this horror show of a game was a good idea?
You're gonna have to play the whole game to find that out, Junpei. Junpei looked over at the others.
I'm gonna ask one more time. Do any of you know anything about Zero?
They were all silent, each person waiting to hear what the others would say. Finally, Santa spoke.
Actually, I saw him. I saw Zero when I got grabbed. I didn't see his face, though. Son of a bitch was wearing some kind of gas mask. What the hell? Come on, guys, give me something. You know, like surprise or something?
Instead, it was Santa who looked surprised. There was a moment of silence, and then everyone spoke at once.
I saw that too.
Let's see. We're coming up on the first decision. I'll probably stop there.
Me too. I didn't see inside the mask, though. That mask, it was really scary.
Huh? Oh, so all of our abductions were the same. We were taken from home at midnight. The person claiming to be Zero had a mask on. There was white smoke, and then each of us passed out. We woke up to find ourselves on D deck, in a room with a 3-level bunk bed.
How about you, Seven? Did the same happen to you?
Only Seven's story seemed to lack the detail of the others.
Oh, me? Yeah, well, mine was just like the rest of yours.
That was all he had said. It had occurred to Junpei at the time that it sounded somewhat strange, but he didn't press the issue.
Okay, that's good enough for now.
Alright. He hadn't done so because there was something that struck him as even stranger.
So, I have a question.
Was the mystery of the relationship between Snake and Clover?
Clover, you were both kidnapped from the same room, and you woke up together.
Junpei looked at them thoughtfully.
So, what's the deal with the two of you anyway?
It was Clover that answered. Clearly she felt she had nothing to
We're
hide.
siblings.
Siblings?
Yes. Snake is my older brother, obviously. That means I'm his little sister.
Older brother, little sister trope. Take another shot.
That really so hard to understand?
Junpei was taken aback. The others seemed just as surprised.
She is correct, of course.
He laid his hand on Clover's
Are
shoulder.
you, surprised?
Well, yeah, but...
Why? There are other people here with connections to one another. Those two, for instance.
Snake pointed at Junpei and June.
Oh, you mean between Junpei and me?
Ah, yes. You did say you were childhood friends, didn't you?
Wait, you went to school together?
Yeah.
June glanced at Junpei, uncomfortable with the sudden attention.
Yeah.
Junpei felt somewhat nervous as well and tried to scratch his head as casually as possible.
Hey, you think maybe we could figure out who Zero is this way?
Yeah, you're right. You connect the dots between the victims, and that leads you to the perp. Textbook stuff.
He sounds like a narc to me.
Junpei, June, does any of this ring a bell?
Huh, ring a bell.
Ring a bell?
They looked at one another, and like it was staged, they both tilted their heads back at the same time.
Well, perhaps you went to school with the son of a multimillionaire.
A millionaire?
Son?
Well, someone bought this boat and set up all of this. Whoever Zero is, they must be incredibly rich.
Well, we can't be sure of that. To me, this seems as though it's the work of an organization, not an individual. Most likely, Zero is simply the representative of a larger group.
What sort of organization?
It could be a number of things. An army, perhaps, or a Research group? Perhaps this is all some sort of psychological experiment.
If it is, then it's a pretty fucked up experiment.
Agreed.
I mean, come on! A guy's dead!
The word dead hung in the air, heavy and ominous. The room went quiet again.
I don't know who the hell this Zero asshole is, but I know for sure he's gotta be pretty fucked up in the head to do all this. If this was all one guy, then he's got some serious issues.
Even with the specter of death hanging over them, their discussions continued for some time.
I thought we were finished with that topic.
But then what should we do?
We should talk it through.
Oh my god, enough! All we're doing is talking!
Santa threw his hands up, his voice filled with irritation.
Talking won't solve anything! It can't help us find our way out of here! You really sure you want to just sit around? We've only got 7.5 hours left. We already wasted an hour and a half of our 9 hours.
Everyone there was already on edge of panic. What Santa told them had only made the feeling more intense. No one was willing to argue this time.
You're right.
Very well then. There's only one way for us to proceed.
Sure not gonna be fun running around knowing we gotta jump when Zero says jump.
Well, it's stupid to just sit around here doing nothing.
Thanks to Snake's card, at least we have some idea of how this all works.
Correct. And so long as we all follow the rules, we will most likely be all right.
But what?
Who's going to go in which door?
June looked toward the numbered doors.
Oh yeah, that's right. We can't have any more than 5 people in one door.
I'm gonna go ahead and save here. Nice. No.
All 8 of us can't go in the same door.
Then it would seem we will have to split up.
Wait.
Lotus looked terrified.
I'm telling you now, there is no way in hell that I'm going into door 5.
Come on now, don't be selfish.
Call me whatever the hell you want. I'm not going in there. If I'm going to have to walk through all that blood, then I'd rather stay here.
And we were doing so well.
Ace shook his head sadly.
Sorry, but I ain't going in there either. Someone else can go into door 5.
Oh, Santa, not you too.
Hey man, I just bought these shoes. If you think I'm getting some creepy dude's blood all over him, you got another thing coming.
Another think coming. That was the last straw.
Man? Weren't you the one who kept saying we should get going?
Yeah, so doesn't mean I wanted to go into door 5.
Oh, God.
There's an awkward silence. Finally, Seven spoke.
Fine, I'll go into door 5. I can't go in there alone though. Anyone else willing to come with me?
There was another long silence. This time Snake was the one to break it.
I'll go.
What?
Don't worry. You'll be fine. We may part now, but I'm certain we'll meet again later.
How do you know that?
Because I do.
That's not an answer! If you're going, I'm going too. I'm going into door 5.
What am I going to do with you?
There's nothing you have to do.
Ace
If I
stepped forward.
join you, the problem is solved, correct? 7 is 7, and Snake is 2. And if you add Clover's 4 and my 1, the digital root will be 5.
7 plus 2 plus 4 plus 1 is 14. The digital root of 14. 1 plus 4 is 5.
Oh, it works perfectly! The 4 of us can go into door 5.
It's a fun little hop she did.
Wait. What about the other 4? What's their digital root gonna be?
Junpei did a quick mental calculation.
Lotus, Santa, June, and me. Our bracelet numbers are 8, 3, 6, and 5.
11, 14, 22, 4.
8, 3, 6, 5. What would our digital... 8 plus 3 plus 6 plus 5 is 22. The digital root of 22, 2 plus 2 equals 4.
Repeat what you
It's
determined.
4. Add up our 4 bracelet numbers and the digital root is 4.
Then we can go into door 4.
Yeah. Huh. That worked out well.
So the team assignments will be like this. 7, Snake, Clover, and Ace. They would go through door 5. Lotus, Santa, June, and me will go through door 4. Are these really the teams I want? Beyond door 5 is what remains of the 9th man. I never want to see that thing again, but something's telling me that it'd be a good idea to examine the corpse, even just a little closer. Of course, if I went through door 5, I wouldn't be going with Lotus and Santa. I could bring June with me through door 5, but that means she'd have to see the body in there. I don't want to put her through that.
Junpei was torn.
Should I stay silent and go through door 4, or should I stop them and insist on door 5?
He turned the options over and over in his mind. Ace spoke up.
All right then. It seems we've reached a conclusion. Shall we go?
You began to work
I'm
toward
going
her.
through door 5.
Save.
We're over there too, right?
The door's not going anywhere. Slow down.
Which door?
Alright, this is the first important decision of the game. So I'm going to go ahead and stop it here, because we've already been going for 1 hour 15 minutes, and that's plenty for a single session. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream, and we'll pick this up next time, making our first decision in the game. First meaningful decision. So take care, see y'all later, bye.